Imagine you're a lay hero. You're full of faith and you're not okay. Something that troubles God also troubles you. It could be deep concern about your child's character. It could be someone you know who isn't right with God yet, and that's just not okay with you. They've got to know God the way you know God. They've got to have a relationship with God, and you're troubled by that. It could be the fact that you heard that the average nursing home resident receives one piece of mail per year, and that's it. You heard that, and you just can't ignore it. You can't forget that statistic, and so you decided you're going to start going to nursing homes. You're way outside your comfort zone, but you're going to get to know some people and make sure they have some contact. It could be a situation in your school district that you're aware of, and you're like, this thing that's going on there is not okay, and so you're running for the school board. It could be a person that you know who isn't being treated like a person with dignity, someone at your school or someone at work, and they're not being treated right, and you feel compelled to intervene. It could be a societal ill like human trafficking. It could be a problem like child hunger or child obesity. It could be a problem that affects people you don't know, or a friend of yours, or something that's going on in your grandson's life. It could be something that's hurting the lives of many people, or as far as you know, just one. But it's something that you can't ignore. It's something that you can't seem to forget, and you can't put it entirely out of your mind. And so you've said yes to God. You said, yes, God, you're broken over that, and it's bothering me too. Let's do something about it. And so you're praying, you're planning. Maybe you're already trying to do something about this thing that is not okay. You're a lay hero. Now imagine that we have a chance to get together, and we're chatting over a cup of coffee about this thing. And if we were able to do that, there's a very high probability that a portion of our conversation will go something like this. At some point you would say something to me like this: Pastor Andy, it feels like ever since I said yes to God, one thing after another has gone wrong. Then you tell me. You start listing them out. This broke, and this thing quit, and this person is, I'm having some conflict with them, and this isn't going right, and that's not going right. And maybe you'd tell me that, none of it's catastrophic, but it's just one thing after another. And at some point you're like, am I crazy? I mean, because it seems like that. I mean, it seems like ever since I said yes to God, am I crazy? And I would respond to you, no, you're not crazy. And no, you're not imagining things. You're probably spot on. It probably is one thing after another, and it probably is linked to the fact that you said yes to God. Let me show you something from Nehemiah's story. This takes place right after he arrived at Jerusalem, but before he's even told the residents why he's there. This is Nehemiah 2, verse 9. I went to the governors of the region of the west of the Euphrates, and I gave them the king's letters. And the king also had sent his officers of the infantry and cavalry with me. When Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official heard that someone had come to pursue the prosperity of the Israelites, they were greatly displeased. I don't think Sanballat and Tobiah knew exactly what Nehemiah was going to do, but they knew, because they were connected to the government, they knew that Nehemiah was there to do something to help the Israelites. And they didn't like that. Why? Well, because it was good for them to have the Israelites being in such a vulnerable position. They were taking advantage of that. It was working for them. And so this is the second thing I would probably say to you if we were having that chat over coffee. It's not you. It has nothing to do with you personally. There are forces out there that don't want change. And there may be forces that are profiting from the very thing that's not okay. And so they definitely don't want change. Lay hero friends, over the next several minutes, we're going to unmask and uncover some things. The knowledge that you pick up today might make the difference between success and failure in what it is that you're setting out to fix or change or solve. So we're looking at Nehemiah's story. Nehemiah arrived in Jerusalem. After a few days, he personally inspected the walls, and then he called the people together and he said to them, look, you see the trouble we're in. Jerusalem lies in ruins and its gates have been burned. This is not okay. Let's rebuild the walls. Verse 18, I told them how the gracious hand of my God had been on me and what the king had said to me. And they said, let's start rebuilding. And their hands were strengthened to do this good work. That's verse 18. Verse 19. When Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite official, and Geshem the Arab heard about this, they mocked and despised us and said, what is this thing you're doing? Are you rebelling against the king? Opposition began almost immediately. The people said, let's build, yeah! Sanballat and friends mocked and accused them immediately. I've got a friend who says, no good deed goes unpunished. Yeah, I mean, Nehemiah shows up to do a good deed for these people. And he's already getting beat up for it, right? He's already being punished by Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem, right? They're already going after him. Well, Nehemiah responded to them and then organized the work. You got individuals to take responsibility for a specific section of the wall, and they began to remove the rubble and make the repairs. You can read all about that in chapter 3. Let's jump back into the story, chapter 4, verse 1. When Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became furious. He mocked the Jews before his colleagues and the powerful men of Samaria and said, what are these pathetic Jews doing? Can they restore it by themselves? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they ever finish it? Can they bring these burnt stones back to life from the mounds of rubble? Then Tobiah the Ammonite, who was beside him, said, indeed, even if a fox climbed up on what they were building, he would break down their wall. Right? So they're mocking the work that's going on there. In verses 4 to 6, you see Nehemiah's response. Prayer, and then get back to work. Verse 4, listen, our God, for we are despised. Make their insults return on their own heads, and let them be taken as plunder to a land of captivity. Do not cover their guilt or let their sin be erased from your sight, because they have angered the builders. So we rebuilt the wall until the entire wall was joined up together to half its height, for the people had a will to keep working. Well, there we go. Round one, right? Nehemiah and the workers, like, okay, we're going to go. Sanballat and friends do their dirty thing, say a bunch of stuff, mock them, blah, blah, blah. And the workers get back to work and continue. So it's done, right? Sanballat and friends give up. Not on your life. Verse 7. When Sanballat, Tobiah, and the Arabs, Ammonites, and Ashdodites heard that the repairs of the walls of Jerusalem was progressing and that the gaps were being closed, they became furious. They all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and throw it into confusion. So now we've gone from a war of words to actually plans for a literal war. They are plotting. In verses 9 and following, you see Nehemiah's response to this new threat, this new opposition. Prayer, an armed guard, and back to work. Verse 9. So we prayed to our God and stationed a guard because of them day and night. So I stationed people behind the lowest sections of the wall at the vulnerable areas. I stationed them by families with their swords, spears, and bows. After I made an inspection, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, don't be afraid of them. Remember the great and awe-inspiring Lord and fight for your countrymen, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your homes. When our enemies heard that we knew their scheme and that God had frustrated it, every one of us returned to his own work on the wall. From that day on, half of my men did the work while the other half held spears, shields, bows, and armor. The officers supported all the people of Judah who were rebuilding the wall. The laborers who carried the loads worked with one hand and held a weapon with the other. Each of the builders had his sword strapped around his waist while he was building, and the one who sounded the ram's horn was beside me. Then I said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, the work is enormous, and we are spread out, and we are separated far from one another along the wall. Whenever you hear the sound of the ram's horn, rally to us there. Our God will fight for us. So we continued the work, while half of the men were holding spears from daybreak until the stars came out. At that time, I also said to the people, let everyone, his servants, spend the night inside Jerusalem so that they can stand guard by night and work by day. And I, my brothers and my servants, and the men of the guard with me never took off our clothes. Each carried his weapon, even when washing. And so there's this pattern that develops. We've seen it already. This is the pattern from the very beginning of the wall project until it's finished. And here's how it goes. Work led to opposition. Opposition resulted in prayer by Nehemiah. And that prayer, then after that, there was an adjustment, some sort of wise action Nehemiah took in light of what was going on, the threat of the moment, and then they got back to work. And because the work continued, opposition came again. Next one, right? Round 2, round 3, round 4, opposition. Each round of opposition, Nehemiah responds with prayer, and then an adjustment, and then they get back to work. Lay heroes. When God gives you the opportunity that you prayed for, the opportunity that I encouraged you to pray for in part 2 of this series, when God gives you the opportunity you prayed for, expect a non-stop parade of opposition and obstacles. Just expect it. A non-stop stream, a parade, whatever word you want to use there, of opposition and obstacles. Nehemiah faced just about every type you can imagine. In chapter 6, I just started making a list of the types of opposition that he faced. Verses 1 to 4, distraction. The bad guy is like, hey, Nehemiah, we need to talk to you. We need to talk to you. This is really important. Come here. Come on down. We need to have a meeting. And it's not about a meeting. They're trying to keep him from doing the work. They're opposing the work by trying to get him distracted. And he responds to that by, look, I'm doing something really important here. I don't have time for a chit-chat, prayer, response, back to work. So they don't give up. Verse 5, they try the next round. Accusation. Nehemiah, what you're doing is wrong, and we're going to tell on you, and you're going to get in really, really, really big trouble with the king for this, because we know what you're really up to. And accusation, and they're lies, but accusation. Verses 10 to 14, another round of opposition. This time it's intimidation. They get some others involved and have this scheme whereby they're going to try to get Nehemiah afraid for his own life. They're going to intimidate him. All to get the work to stop. Nehemiah also faces all kinds of obstacles. He faces external dangers, right? Those that aren't from his own group, from the people that he's working with, the Israelites. These are external to that. It's the guys that we just mentioned, right? Sanballat and friends. Chapter 4, verses 7 to 23. We read about that, the external danger that he faced. Nehemiah also faced the obstacle of insufficient resources. Chapter 5, verses 17 and 18, you find that Nehemiah isn't getting what's due to him. Resources that he should have had and perhaps could have really used because of the situation and everything that's going on. And so there's some insufficiency in the resources that should be available to him. And then one more type of obstacle. And I think this is the worst one of the bunch. As a leader and in my conversations with other leaders, I got to tell you, this is probably the most frustrating one of them all. This is the one that really hurts, really takes the fight out of you a lot of times. Because as leaders, you don't like it, but you kind of expect opposition from your enemies. They are enemies. But we're often blindsided by this next obstacle that I'm going to talk about, and it's this: bad behavior by insiders. Maybe bad behavior might be an euphemism, but I think you'll catch what I mean here. Bad behavior, people that you are praying about, people you are trying to help, people that are your people, the very ones that should be on the inside and your colleagues and helping you, are making this harder, much harder, because of something they're doing that is not right. It's just bad behavior, whether it's complaining or something else. Let's look at the situation Nehemiah faced. This is chapter 5, verse 1. By the way, the wall is about up to half height at this point, and it's moving. People are still, they're not giving in, they're not giving up, and yet it's all about to grind to a halt because of a new challenge. And the challenge is coming because, at least it's being complicated by people on the inside. Nehemiah 5, verse 1, there was a widespread outcry from the people and their wives against the Jewish countrymen. Some were saying, our sons and our daughters are numerous. Let us get grain so that we can eat and live. Others were saying, we're mortgaging our fields, vineyards, and homes to get grain during the famine. Still others were saying, we borrowed money to pay the king's tax on our fields and vineyards. We and our children are just like our countrymen and our children. Yet we are subjugating our sons and daughters to slavery. Some of our daughters are already enslaved. but we're powerless because of the fields and vineyards belong to others. Here's what's going on. Some of the workers, several of the families do not have enough. They don't have their basic necessities. They don't have enough food. So they're trying to buy it. And now they've run out of money. And so they have to borrow money to try to buy food. And there are a few rich Israelites who have plenty of food. And so they're selling it back to these people who have none, but the people don't have money, and so they borrowed money, but then they're getting charged interest, which is something God had forbidden the Israelites to do. It's like, you can charge interest to others, but you don't charge interest to fellow Israelites. And then, when they couldn't pay, these Israelites who had means were requiring some of these Israelites who were starving, who were suffering, to sell their own kids into bondage in a form of slavery in order to pay off the debt. And so the work is coming to a halt because of this internal civil division and starvation, right? And so verse 6, Nehemiah says, I became extremely angry when I heard their outcry and these complaints. After seriously considering the matter, I accused the nobles and officials, saying to each of them, each of you is charging his countrymen interest. So I have called a large assembly against them and said, we have done our best to buy back our Jewish countrymen who were sold to foreigners. But now you are selling your own countrymen, and we have to buy them back. And they remained silent and could not say a word. Then I said, what you are doing isn't right. Shouldn't you walk in the fear of our God and not invite reproach of our foreign enemies? Even I, as well as my brothers and my servants, have been lending them money and grain. Please, let's stop charging this interest. Return their fields, vineyards, olive groves, and houses them immediately, along with a percentage of the money, grain, new wine, and fresh oil that you've been assessing them. Nehemiah's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I've been taking money, the money I have, and helping buy these people back. And now I find out you're the ones who are selling them. You're the ones putting them in this position. I've been loaning people money with no interest because that's the right thing to do. And I have no confidence they'll ever be able to repay me. But you're charging them interest. What are you doing? This is wrong. Knock it off. Verse 12, they responded, we'll return these things and require nothing more of them. We'll do as you say. Yikes. So frustrating. Here's the lay hero principle of part 3. A lay hero perseveres in the face of obstacles and opposition. A lay hero perseveres in the face of obstacles and opposition. How? Well, I think Nehemiah gives us a great model. Just like in the previous part, we talked about the model lay hero prayer. This is maybe the lay hero response to obstacles and opposition. And it's modeled by Nehemiah. Step 1 is to pray. When this stuff happens, pray. And it's really fascinating when you read Nehemiah's prayers. If you read through the whole book, you find that Nehemiah prayed different prayers depending on the situation. Sometimes he prayed what I call warfare prayers, like, God, see this? You see what's going on? Deal with this. I read one of them to you already. This is Nehemiah 4, verse 4. Listen, our God, for we are despised. Make their insults return on their own heads, and let them be taken as plunder to a land of captivity. Do not cover their guilt or let their sin be erased from your sight, because they've angered the builders. Like, God, you see what they're going to do? Deal with them, God, and don't let them get away with this. I'm going to leave it to you to wrestle with something I've been wrestling with all week. Is it okay for Jesus followers to pray these kinds of prayers? I mean, what about Jesus, and he said, love your enemies, pray for those who mistreat you, right? Is it okay for Jesus followers to pray these? I'm going to leave you to wrestle with that. But Nehemiah prayed warfare prayers. And I will say this, even if you come to the conclusion that it's not okay to pray that way, there are ways to pray a warfare kind of prayer, right? God, do something about this situation. God, bring them to their senses. God, fix this, right? There are some ways to do that. Second, Nehemiah sometimes prayed what I'm going to call remember me prayers. Remember me prayers. Here's an example, chapter 5, verse 19. Remember me favorably, my God, for all I've done for this people. This is a prayer that I think is saying, God, see me. See me, see the situation I'm in. And God, when you evaluate me, I'm not perfect. I know that. I have messed up so much. But God, when you look at me and you evaluate me, please remember that I have really tried. Please remember what I've done. God, please look on me with favor. Because I've really tried. And sometimes Nehemiah prayed what I'm going to call help me prayers. God, help me. God, help me. Chapter 6, verse 9 talks about they were all trying to intimidate us, thinking, well, they'll drop their hands because they're just, they're just going to give up because they're so weak and tired and stuff like that. Nehemiah prays, this is the end of verse 9, but now God strengthen my hands. Strengthen my hands. God, help me. God, help me. I'm about done. I'm about done. Come to my aid. God, strengthen me. So pray. Then second, adjust. This is awesome. I mean, you think about Nehemiah. He was full of faith, right? God is awesome. God is awe-inspiring, right? But he's also a realist. Nehemiah is the same guy. He says in chapter 1, verse 20, God will give us success. But then in 4:23, here's your sword. And when you hear the ram's horn, you come running with your sword out. Nehemiah he wasn't one or the other. He wasn't like, hey, yeah, it's all on us. But he wasn't all like, God's going to fight for us so you don't have to show up to the battle and don't bother bringing your sword. He made adjustments. He acted wisely. He looked at the threat. And he took the threat seriously. First, by praying about it. And second, by making an adjustment. And then third, get back to work. Get back to work. Friends, if the problem that God gave you to solve isn't solved, you're probably not done yet. Get back to work. Well, did it work? What was the result of all of that? Well, God's favor plus Nehemiah's perseverance led to an outcome that cannot be explained apart from God. Nehemiah 6, verse 15. The wall was completed. Let that soak in. The wall was completed. But not only is it completed, Nehemiah continues, the wall was completed in 52 days. That's crazy. Now, on the 25th day of the month Elul, verse 16, though, is the other half of this amazing accomplishment. When all of our enemies heard this, all the surrounding nations were intimidated and they lost their confidence, for they realized that this task had been accomplished by our God. This is amazing. The wall is completed, and God got the credit. People who were far from God, people who didn't even like God, who didn't care about God whatsoever, knew that there is a God. That's what happened in Nehemiah's story. Lay hero friends. I think that's what's going to happen in yours too. I don't know when, I don't know how, don't know for sure if it's in your lifetime, but I believe this, God's favor plus your perseverance is going to result in an outcome that just cannot be explained apart from God. Something's going to happen. Something will be accomplished. Some problem will be solved. Something's going to be fixed. Somebody's going to be changed. Something's going to be different. Plus, credit's going to go to God. One more thing before I let you go. This is really important. The element of surprise is often vital to the success of a combatant's plans, right? You're familiar with this. If you've watched movies or you've been in the military or even if you tried to, pull off something, is pretty out there, that the element of surprise is a really big deal, and it might be the key component of your plan. Lay heroes, I want you to hear me on this. It's a key component in your enemy's plans. Your enemy, our enemy, wants you to be surprised by the opposition that you face and the obstacles you face. He wants you to be surprised. He wants you to be taken back by that, not expecting that. That element of surprise is so important to him. Why? Because being surprised by opposition sets you up for quitting and eventually for failure at the change that God wanted to make through you. When we are surprised, it just seems to You just didn't expect it, and you didn't, or didn't expect it to continue like that. And that surprise, we weren't prepared for it. And because we weren't prepared for it, it's almost like we don't have an answer for it. So it wears us down way prematurely, and we quit. Please hear me on this. The enemy doesn't have to beat you in order to win. He's already winning in this world, okay? He's already winning in this world. He doesn't have to beat you in order to win. He simply has to take the fight out of you. And then you'll quit all by yourself. You'll quit on your own. He doesn't have to take you out. He just has to take the fight out of you. You understand what I'm saying by that? He just has to take out that willingness to keep going, that angst or that anger or that God, this is not right and we've got to do something. That's what he's got to take out of you. Because if he takes that out of you, he will quit. You'll quit all by yourself. And being surprised by the opposition you face is an amazingly effective way of taking the fight out of you. Because he knows. He knows. He could win by beating you, but that's way too hard. He'll more likely try to win by just getting you to quit. But taking the fight out of you. Friends, lay heroes. This problem, this situation that breaks the heart of God and deeply bothers you, it can be addressed. Something can be changed. This is a wall that can be built. It seems like an impossible task, but something can be done about this. And God wants your story, I believe, God wants your story to go like Nehemiah's, where there is a result, there is a change, and there's credit that goes to God. And so he is willing and more than willing, happy to walk through this with you. Walk through the wave after wave of opposition that you're going to face, the wave after wave of obstacles that you're going to face. He wants to hear that prayer, whether it's a remember me prayer or help me prayer or God, do you see what's going on? It's a warfare kind of prayer. He wants to hear your prayers and he wants to respond to that. He wants to lead you and give you wisdom so that you know what is that appropriate adjustment to take now. Do you take this seriously or is this an idle threat? Do you have to make a change or not? He wants to help you make that adjustment and he wants to help you get back to work because what he has started in you and started through you, he wants to carry on. Because he wants you to be a lay hero, not just a lay martyr. Friends, your enemy, he's got a vested interest in seeing you quit. He likes things the way they are. He's profiting from things the way they are. But your Father, the one who called you, the one who burdened your heart, wants to do something in you and through you that can't be done any other way. I'm praying for you this week. I'm praying that you will persevere, that you won't be surprised by what you're facing, but you will persevere. You will pray. You'll make adjustments. And by God's grace, you'll get back to work and things will happen. The wall will be built. There's more to share. I look forward to gathering with you in parts 4 and 5.